Good evening. This is the Coeur d'Alene Planning and Zoning Commission, and we are here for our June meeting. It's Tuesday, June 14th. Shannon, would you do the roll call, please?
Yeah.
Jordan?
Here.
Fleming?
Here.
Ingalls?
Here.
Lutrip?
Here.
Messina?
Here.
Rumpler?
Here.
Ward?
Here.
Okay, everybody's here tonight. Okay, next, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so first of all, we have approval of minutes from the May 10th meeting.
I'd like to make a correction. It shows that I was present, but I do know I was out of town and I was not at the meeting, so.
Thanks for pointing that out, and I recall you not being here.
Right.
Staff is taking note of that. Anything else? Any other corrections? Any motion?
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
By Ingalls, second by Lutrip. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Let's see. Next is public comments, and this would be if anybody in the audience would like to address the Planning Commission of a matter of a general nature. If you're here for one of the meetings tonight, one of the hearings tonight, then there'll be some time to testify at that time. Okay, seeing none. Any commissioner comments?
Mr. Chair, if I
Lutrip.
could, just a few minutes ago, a person came up here and said he was surprised to see people here 25 years after apparently he came before us. Well, we have a community tribute that is going to be held on the 1st of July at McEwen, and it's going to honor Scott Reed and Art Manley, who are two former planning and zoning members. So the planning and zoning is a good ground for lots of things. This will be a community tribute to Scott and Art for, among other things, what they did with Tubbs Hill over the years. There will be some speakers. There will be free huckleberry ice cream, free lemonade, and music. And one of the instruments for the music will be from the Freedom Tree. If you recall, the Freedom Tree protected that area until the area was into the park and the Freedom Tree could be dismissed because it did its job. And it's a thank you, a community tribute to two gentlemen, former planning and zoning members, but very, very active in our community in a very positive way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, staff comments. Hillary?
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. So a few comments. The July meeting, we have two items scheduled for that. There's a special use permit request and an annexation request. I have also just received the existing conditions report, which is a survey for Fort Grounds neighborhood. So the Neighborhood Association Committee has compiled that report. I have not yet reviewed it, but I will be circulating that to Commission, City Council, and to the neighborhood so they can review it. And then we can get back together and determine how the Commission and the City Council want to proceed. As you recall, they had requested that we did a neighborhood compatibility ordinance. And so this was that first step in determining if that was appropriate or not. Also, we are continuing to work on the vacation rental ordinance. So we're moving forward with that. Need to do some more internal discussion and work through the ordinance language, and then we'll be able to bring something back for you. And then lastly, I wanted to introduce the new Deputy City Administrator, Sam Taylor, who started yesterday. So I'll ask him to come up and say a few words so you can meet him and he can show his face to our community.
Hello, Sam. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me this evening. I thought I'd just come say hi, and thank you to Hillary for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be back home. For the last decade or so, I've been out of the area, but since I was 4 years old, I grew up in Coeur d'Alene. All my schooling was done here. I'm a Vandal, and I'm very, very, very honored to be working for my home city and being able to raise my three little boys here as well. So what you do is so important to the future of those kids, and I appreciate your work, and I'm very excited to help you in any way I can. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
That's all.
All right, we have several hearings tonight. The first are administrative. The first one is the City of Coeur d'Alene is the applicant. Mr. Jim Hammond, our administrator, and the request is regarding a de-annexation of parcels from the Urban Renewal River and Lake Districts. This is administrative item I-5-16.
Mr. Chairman
it's all
and
yours.
Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to visit with you this evening. When urban renewal districts are formed, the basic effort within that district is to increase property values so that the various taxing districts can enjoy a greater level of revenue. And what that does is it spreads the tax load more evenly over all taxpayers within that district. Secondarily, then, it is also hopeful that as you create these districts and create these improvements within districts, that you create a better and a greater job space. So the two districts within the City of Coeur d'Alene have done very well. So well, in fact, that one of the things that we're looking at right now is trying to remove some properties within each district, and the legal term is de-annexation. We're trying to remove those properties so that we can start pushing back some of that tax revenue to the county, to North Idaho College, to the city, and the highway districts, so that might enjoy some of the revenue from the improvements within those two districts prior to the actual closing of those districts. I want to make one correction here, and it's maybe not really cogent to the particular issue for Planning and Zoning Commission, but it's important to understand that the city is the proponent of this issue mainly because we too need additional revenue, and we're trying to do that without raising taxes to an unsustainable level. And the reason that we need those enhanced revenues is that we have found that as a city, we have to substantially improve our policing within the community. And last year, we made a decision to hire some additional police officers, and we actually raided money that we intended to use for firefighters. So in the end, we have so far about 5. We really need over 20 new patrolmen, but we're only hiring about maybe 9 to 10. So this revenue will help, it will be one source of revenue to be able to afford those additional patrolmen. The challenge that Coeur d'Alene has that Post Falls and Rathdrum and Hayden do not have is a lot of services are available within Coeur d'Alene, and it draws an element that needs a little higher level of policing than the rest of us need. And in order to ensure that all of us have a safe community, we need to provide that higher level of policing. Getting back to the issue before you tonight, then, what I'm asking you to do is look at your comprehensive plan and move or make some kind of a motion that would make a recommendation to the City Council that you see the effort at de-annexation as an effort that is what's the term I want? That fits with your comprehensive plan.
Okay.
That's all. I don't know how much more you need from me, but I'll be glad to answer questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Mr. Hammond? Go ahead.
Mr. Hammond, question on urban renewal, and that's really a side issue. Our issue really is whether or not, this is in sync with the comp plan, and my reading says it is. But just curious, back to the district, we used to talk about a whole district being closed out at some point, and then there would be kind of a windfall, if you will, to the city. So Isn't this kind of is there new legislation or something that has happened recently that allows for this phase out, if you will, or a partial kind of a partial closure? Is that a new authority? Or?
The ability to do that has always existed. But in more recent years, what has happened is, well, in fact, just prior to the last legislative session, the Attorney General's office made an interpretation that any change to the plan within each district, they call it a modification, any plan modification would result in a reset of the base. So all of the improvements that would occur within a district would have to be reset to the base, and you'd have to start over. Now, under new legislation that was passed this session, if that modification is a modification that's a result of a de-annexation, you do not have to reset the base. So it allows you to remove some properties and start pushing some of those revenues out without any penalty in terms of a reset of the base.
The urban renewals, they terminate at a certain period of time, a certain date, correct? So when that happens, does that have to come before planning and zoning on like this de-annexation is tonight?
When a district closes, the different taxing entities are allowed to take the values that were held within that district and count that as new growth.
But there's no action that has to take place.
No.
So the only reason we're doing this action is because the city is, in their wisdom, has determined that it's best for our community to take part of the urban renewal properties and exclude them from the urban renewal and thereby affect the.
And anytime that you do a plan modification, you're expected to take that before Planning and Zoning Commission. And really, this doesn't affect the comp plan, but typically, any modification would be an addition to the urban renewal area, and so it might affect the comprehensive plan, and that's why it typically is brought before you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Hammond, just curious, how much revenue are we talking about here on an annual basis?
The revenue that will be generated by this is about $1.4 million. But out of that, it gets complicated. Some of that revenue will just go directly back to taxpayers in a rebate form. So there's about $800,000 that actually will be revenue that will be distributed between $800,000 and $900,000, be distributed to NIC and the county and the city and the affected highway districts.
So none of it goes to the general fund? It's restricted for those, the funding would be restricted for those other entities that you just described?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, this would be, is this a simple motion, I guess?
Simple motion, yes.
Okay, just like any interpretation, that the de-annexation would still be in conformance with a comprehensive plan.
I think it's important to note that de-annexation here has a meaning specific, different than when we're talking about annexing property as a city, right?
Well, the urban renewal district is de-annexing portions of the city from the urban renewal district boundaries.
Well, it seems to make a lot of sense to me.
So, Mr. Chair, staff has included a number of excerpts from the comp plan in our packet, and those comp plan applicable citations from the special areas affected have words to the effect that the city will work in conjunction with Lake City Development Corporation as those areas are developed and so forth, a pretty general statement, and going forward, as areas are partially de-annexed, I would think the city continues to work with Ignite CDA. So, the tie to the comp plan is a fairly general one that I think continues after this. So, with that in mind, I would motion that we recommend to the City Council approval of the proposed amendments presented.
Have you got that?
Yes, and Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Engels, just clarify that it is also in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
Correct.
Please.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a second. And any discussion? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so that passes unanimously. The I-516, that the annexation is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Okay, our next one, the applicant is the City of Coeur d'Alene, and this is an interpretation of drive-through uses in the downtown core zoning district, administrative item I-3-16.
Okay, great.
Planning Director Hillary.
Yes, so interpretation of drive-through uses in the downtown core zoning district. The request is that the Planning Commission consider if drive-through uses are appropriate in the downtown core, and if so, in what locations. There's been a request by a property owner, Gary Fowler, who is here this evening. He owns the property where the Zip Stop is currently located at Sherman and 7th, and he is interested in putting a Starbucks with a drive-through at that location. So I'll walk you through some of the downtown core, the zoning district, and some of the design standards, and then I'll show you some of his conceptual drawings so you can kind of get the full picture of what's at stake here. So there's a few highlighted sections here, really just kind of showing what is the intent of the downtown core. It really is to have that focus on the pedestrian environment, kind of the vibrant street, attracting shoppers and visitors, kind of the mix of uses, supporting pedestrian movement, et cetera, and then also consistency with the comprehensive plan. Prohibited uses in the downtown core zoning district, there's actually 15 that are listed in there, and 2 of them are here. So the drive-through businesses along pedestrian-oriented streets. So the zoning code then identifies within the downtown core what streets are restricted to pedestrian-oriented uses, and then the other ones are more automotive. Gasoline sales are restricted throughout the downtown core. Obviously, there is a Zip Stop there now. That was there before. It's grandfathered in, so it's legal non-conforming. And then there's also the ability for the planning director to determine if there's other uses that are prohibited. So that is specifically noted in the zoning code. This is a map showing what are the pedestrian-oriented streets within the downtown core, and those are highlighted in kind of the light blue. And so it's primarily is Sherman and then some of the north-south streets as well. Then over here in this kind of light orange color, this is the downtown overlay east side, and drive-throughs are also restricted from 8th to 11th Street. So really, as you can see here, there are only, let me go back a slide, sorry. There's only 2 blocks where drive-throughs would be allowed in the all of Sherman, other than, I guess, this little section here that ties into Northwest Boulevard. And so it is our opinion that drive-throughs are not appropriate on this section, but the interpretation is for you to weigh in on that this evening. And staff has also observed that the downtown really has become even more pedestrian-oriented as it's evolved since the time that the downtown development standards and zoning has taken place. The design guidelines were adopted in 2006. The Zip Stop and Zips were in place at that time, so they acknowledged that there were existing drive-through and gasoline sales at that location. But as you are aware, and I'll show you a few images, it has been evolving further eastward, and then also along Front Avenue, where we have now kind of the parking. There's additional parking. We have McEwen Park, Parkside, Crafted Brewery. There's a lot of uses that have evolved as as the downtown has been developing. The comprehensive plan speaks to the downtown in several locations. Under Goal 2, which is economic environment, it talks about promoting opportunities for economic growth, and then it speaks to the downtown and the neighborhood service nodes and what's kind of focusing on that, again, the vibrant downtown and compatible neighborhood services. And then this one, it's a little small to see, but it is in the staff report talking about kind of what is in the downtown core, again, walking, shopping, mixed-use atmosphere, all of that's kind of highlighted in here. Design guidelines, again, kind of the new construction focused on pedestrian-oriented retail, service, residential use, et cetera. And of course, the photos highlighting that in the comprehensive plan. So we did get some input from Gary Fowler and let him provide his information because I thought it was appropriate to bring it forward and have you weigh in. And so he has provided, as I mentioned, some conceptual site plans and renderings, which you'll see, and he also did reach out to Starbucks to find out a little bit about traffic. They didn't provide actual traffic counts, but they did provide kind of more of a qualitative statement saying that they believe that it's probably comparable to a convenience store, the traffic counts that would be at a Starbucks with a drive-through, but they'd have to actually do more of a focus study to look at it to take into account how it would interact with pedestrian traffic. And if the commission is supportive of this request, they've indicated that they could get more information, more specific information on traffic. Again, downtown development regulations, design standards, as part of the staff report, I go through the performance analysis. And again, we believe that the vision of the downtown is really to see that transition away from the automotive-oriented uses, such as a gas station, to really have it more walkable, mixed use, kind of the intensification of uses, different than further east on East Sherman or kind of out north where it's more auto-centric. Again, believing that the existing legal non-conforming uses would phase out over time and be replaced with more pedestrian-focused uses, and that it would become more walkable overall and transform to be more walkable. So here are some photos. I'm just going to show you a 2004 and then compare it to the 2015 to kind of show you where changes have occurred in recent years since the time. Again, it was 2006 is when those development standards and design guidelines were adopted. And so you can see here, if I can get the cursor to work. Maybe not. There we go. Okay. So here's Zip Stop, and here is the Zips, which is now Burger Express, I believe, as of late. Here is Crafted, where they have converted the muffler shop to the beer garden, or the beer garden's going to be here, and then this is more the tap house. And then here is I'll show you on the next slide, but this is where we have the Live After 5 events. It's now the park area. We have Parkside is now here, and this used to be some other uses. And then here is where the Willamette Bank and the subway is located. And then, as I mentioned, the on-street parking. So here are the same areas highlighted, so you can see what is current, kind of the transformation just in this small area of the downtown. So I'm going to walk you through the renderings quickly, but then we'll let Mr. Fowler come up and actually speak to these since he's worked with Starbucks and can probably explain it a lot better than I can. But I'll show you from different views. This is looking north at the proposed Starbucks. Over to the right side, the east would be where the now Burger Express is located. So we have Sherman and 7th. Looking northwest at the site. Looking northeast generally. Southwest, so this is the alley here. And then this is 7th and then Sherman. Southeast, kind of looking across the site, here's where the drive-through would be. And they'd be exiting out onto 7th in this current configuration. Here's a visual simulation showing kind of what that view would be from that intersection of 7th and Sherman. And then this is the site plan, conceptual site plan. So again, the stacking of vehicles would be going through here to the drive-through. So I'm going to walk you through just a little bit of the design guidelines, how they have actually presented the site plan. They just did it because we asked for some information. I don't think they really worked through the design guidelines, but how it's oriented right now would not be consistent with the downtown design guidelines. The buildings are supposed to be oriented to the street rather than parking lot, and then the surface parking lots are generally supposed to be located behind the use, and so it would have to be reconfigured if it was something that the commission supported. And then just wanted to show some examples. I did express this to Mr. Fowler, and it is also in the staff report, that Starbucks is great. We'd love to have Starbucks, but the drive-through is really the issue that the planning department feels, is not appropriate within the section of Sherman Avenue. Further east would be great if there was a drive-through Starbucks, but to have a Starbucks in the downtown, we believe it would be more appropriate if it was more kind of the urban style walk-up, no drive-through, incorporated into more of a mixed-use type of building. So just wanted to provide some examples of that. I'm sure you've seen them in all types of cities around the country. So again, decision point, we're kind of have two requests before you. So the planning department asking for your input on drive-through uses. The applicant is asking for you to consider allowing the drive-through, because I had indicated that it's my opinion that the drive-through is not permitted here. So that's kind of the differences of opinion. And there are some other considerations as well. Should we look at expanding the pedestrian-oriented streets in the downtown, recognizing that the downtown has been transforming? Do we want to acknowledge that? And if so, then we would obviously want to update the zoning code and the design guidelines to speak to that. But here's some blocks and some street sections for you to consider. And then also, there is a difference between drive-throughs. We recently had Community First Bank is going to be moving into the KXLY location. And there was a bank there in the past, and so it's a grandfathered use. They're coming back around. And I did get some information from Dave Bobbitt on their drive-through use, and they, on their peak days, have 136 transactions. And that could be somebody doing one transaction, or that could be 2 to 4 transactions. So they don't count vehicles. It's more just drive-through transactions. In comparison, I just did some Google searches. I don't have specific traffic counts for a Starbucks here, but some of them might have as many as 1,700 trips per day. So it is vastly different in terms of, what are the impacts on traffic and the streetscape and kind of that, if we're trying to create more of a walkable downtown. If you have a lot of cars loading up and queuing up, going onto Sherman and 7th, that does impact the downtown. So I wanted you to consider all of that. But I would like to offer up the opportunity for the applicant, the property owner, to come up and speak to you about their concept and talk through the renderings and the site plan, if that's appropriate, and then we can get into questions. But did you have any questions?
I've got a question for
Sure.
Hillary. In that, I was looking at the map. What you have here. So we have on the page 2 of 13, the map, we have the blue, then we have the orange, and in
Correct.
between, there's no color.
Right.
So how did that happen with those two blocks just never, it's just there, right?
Yeah, I think part of it was oversight, and part of it was maybe recognizing that there are or were drive-through uses at the time the design guidelines were drafted. I don't really know, especially this block is odd. I think, probably just the nature of the uses has changed since that time, but it is odd that they would do that and then pick it up again at 8th Street to say between 8th and 11th you can't have drive-through.
So right now, since
Sure.
that is not designated anything,
Correct. It is downtown core. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Huh?
It is downtown core. It's just not pedestrian-oriented.
okay,
That
so it
section.
isn't, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to. It is designated something. It's just not nothing
Right.
by itself. So it is in the downtown core,
It is, correct.
which prohibits drive-throughs? Is that,
It
or
only
does it
prohibits
not?
drive-throughs on pedestrian-oriented streets. It prohibits the gasoline sales, criminal transitional facilities. There's a variety of things it prohibits, but drive-throughs are only prohibited on pedestrian-oriented streets, and then there's a list of them as presented in the staff report, and you kind of look through that. So Sherman from 2nd to 6th Street, 2nd from Lakeside to Sherman,
Right.
all of those.
Yeah, I went through that, and there's nothing in there on, for
Right.
7.
Right.
So, my question is, even though we're not allowing drive-throughs in certain areas, are they allowed a drive-through since this area is kind of in a gray area, or is there,
It's not pedestrian-oriented. Is that,
right?
because it's not pedestrian-oriented, it can circumvent the no drive-through.
Correct, they could, but then I have that ability as planning director to say there's some uses that aren't appropriate, and so that's where we're kind of at
Okay.
this,
Hillary,
the
when were,
standstill. But it's more just, let's evaluate this, and I wanted to
Understood.
get input from
Right,
the commission on it.
when were these lines drawn, this blue and Do you know what year that was?
I believe, well, they were adopted in 2006, so probably 2005. I think it was a couple-year process. And so I think, yeah, the one aerial I showed you was 2004, and so kind of recognizing that it has changed quite a bit since that time.
I can't think of the consultant's name, but it,
Henshaw.
Mark Hinshaw?
Hinshaw, must have been done when Hinshaw was doing the downtown high-rise study.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's right about that time.
Yeah.
I remember when we went through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But little parts and pieces kind of fade away, yeah. So, I guess I'm just jumping in here, but along with Commissioner Messina's question, the only basis we have why we're here tonight to deny this is because you as the planning director have veto authority, sort of, for a non-conforming use in the downtown. Is that kind of it?
Well, but also to get your input, because I could have said no outright, but I thought it was appropriate because we have seen so much change in the downtown, and I wanted to get input from the
Well,
commission on the appropriateness of drive-throughs moving forward, and because drive-throughs really are not all the same, you know, looking at,
And I appreciate that. Don't take that
Yeah.
wrong. I'm just, it's just, yeah, we have kind of an odd thing here
right.
where it's not in there, and I appreciate you bringing it forward, and I think that was the right thing for you to do. I think the wrong thing is where staff at a given city puts their foot down and says, no, that's it. I made the decision. You can't do that. I think bringing it before the board and the hearing is the way to do it. So I appreciate you did that. Thank you very much. I'm just kind of looking legally at where we're sitting and why they're here tonight.
Yeah.
And by the way, sometime when you don't have a lot to do there at the planning department, I personally think that we should probably be updating these pedestrian-oriented streets because the downtown is evolving and expanding, and I don't know what format we should be looking at to adopt those, but I think we should be having a workshop or putting that on the agenda at some point when you have time to look at expanding the walkable pedestrian-oriented streets.
So a question, if I could, before we move on. As you mentioned, we have kind of two decisions within this staff report. One is the appropriateness to a sounding board to help you determine the appropriateness of this project-specific example at 7th and Sherman. And then the other issue is whether or not to move forward with a change, say, to the 100, 600, and 700 block, making those pedestrian-oriented. And if we did so, and I think that's the easier decision, that we should move forward and do that and get that cleaned up, fixed, or whatnot. What would be the process for that? I guess it would live in the downtown design guidelines, correct?
It would be there, as well as we'd want to amend the development standards, and I believe it's also in the zoning code. We'll have to look at that and figure out exactly where it's referenced, make sure it's updated in both locations.
Sorry. So if we all voted motion to let's move forward to do that, help me understand what the process is. Then as you go and do pen and ink changes to those documents, do they go through a hearing process and that sort of thing? So the people at the 100 block area, as well as everybody involved, gets, I guess, noticed and a chance to come participate in that process? How does that work?
So it would be, if it's, and I'll double check to make sure it was in the zone, if it's in the zoning code, yes, it's the public hearing process, and so it'd have to go planning commission, city council, and we would do the notification. It would be, we wouldn't just do the 500-foot notification, we would notice it in the paper, and then we'd let the downtown association and others know to help spread the word, make sure that people know that that's being discussed, and invite them to come be part of the process. If it's just in the design guidelines, it wouldn't be the public. I don't know how it was done before. I don't believe it would be the public hearing. It would more just be a presentation and then an adoption of it.
So to frame our vote tonight would be just to give you some guidance to
Correct.
go and what direction to start working towards, and there's a whole lot of other formalities and approvals to come
Correct.
after. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
This would be a legislative item, I guess, if we looked at,
I believe the guidelines, yeah, we can look back and see how that was handled last time around.
okay, go ahead.
Well, I think the two issues, one, if we're going to look at this in a broader view, I would encourage us to incorporate East Sherman on there.
Correct.
I mean, it's a continuum from the park Independence Point clear to Lake Coeur d'Alene Drive, maybe further.
Right.
Secondly, initially, what you hear, I concur in your determination that it's not appropriate. I think it doesn't support pedestrian movement, and it doesn't attract shoppers. If you recall that, about a year ago, we visited East Sherman via wheelchair, walking, and so forth, and that was a problem area for pedestrians. I think a Starbucks or anything that would be great there. However, a drive-through, it's sort of like it's that, as you mentioned here, it's a non-conforming use right now, and I think that it's appropriate, if anything's to change, it changes to be conforming. I think if you look at some of the coffee shops that they have, one comes to mind, they're Peterson's Fine Food Store in Sherman. That if you go there at certain times, I mean, the traffic is backed up both ways. It's somewhat of a it's not conducive to walking and so forth. And it's a very popular shop, but I don't think it has the popularity that Starbucks has. But I personally concur in your determination of not an appropriate use of a drive-in.
Okay, anything? Okay, we probably should hear from the
Well, I was
applicant.
gonna say, I'd like to hear from
And then we can do
Mr.
some
Fowler,
more
too,
discussion.
Okay.
Just so our attorney doesn't feel left out, I have a legal question for you. Since this is an interpretation, not quasi-judicial, we don't need to swear the people in that are down here, do we?
No, this is not a public hearing.
Right.
A little bit confused on how this is all transpiring here, but basically
Just
our
state
request...
your name for the record, and then just tell us your story.
Gary Fowler.
Okay.
And the lease is up with the tenant in the convenience store, and we were approached by Starbucks to possibly put a Starbucks at that location. Had a conversation, and if we don't have a drive-through window, they wouldn't be interested. So our take on it was a coffee stand or a Starbucks at that location would be a much better fit than the convenience store that's there now. And so we got to talking to the planning department and stuff, so we got to this point here. So if there's any questions I could answer, we'd like to see it switch. And we also think it would be a better fit for downtown.
So I have a quick question, Mr. Fowler. It sounds like Starbucks has already told you that they've done the research on this and they feel that a drive-through window is what they require. And if
Yes.
that's not part of the plan, then they aren't interested. Is that?
I'm sorry, what was that? I couldn't quite hear you.
I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly. Starbucks is saying that they want to have a drive-through window at that
Yes.
building that's going to be erected, and if there is not a drive-through window, they're not interested in.
That's correct.
Continuing.
They've showed an interest in the property and the location of where it's at. And but if we can't make the switch from the drive-up gas to the drive-up coffee, they would not be interested into a pedestrian-style Starbucks, like she was showing some of the pictures there.
Right.
They indicated that they would not be interested.
So the gas is going away if Starbucks comes in.
Yeah, we would take the canopy down, the gas tanks out of the ground, and do away with all the gas. And then it would be, of course, we'd work it out to where we could put a drive-through in there for Starbucks.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, have you looked at the downtown design guidelines at all with respect to, regardless of whether this is a pedestrian-oriented street or not, the downtown design guidelines exist without any kind of, decision on our part. You understand that?
Yes.
Have you looked at those?
I have not.
And this is not the Design Review Commission, but as Hillary mentioned, there's some fairly glaring things that just jump out that, this would, I think, design commission would struggle with the way the building is sited. I think it would be preferred to see it close to the street like you see across the street with the Willamette and the subway.
Sure.
But more importantly, the one design departure that you would have to request would be a fairly significant one, and that is the parking in front of the building. Not to sit here and try to solve this, but whether the drive-through occurs or not, to me, is to some degree less objectionable than having a building sitting back like that with a small sea of parking in front of it. That is what detracts from it having a downtown feel, a friendliness for people walking by and whatnot, the separation of that sea of parking. So have you thought about the building sitting closer, the parking in the back, with still some kind of a drive-through? To me, it's maybe not so much whether there's a drive-through, it's kind of how it's designed and detailed.
I see. We would not be opposed to moving the building up front, as long as we could have a drive-through to satisfy them. I think that it's a possibility.
Sure. So on page 8 of 13, I'm looking at again another visual, which includes the Zips property. You kind of look at this as one kind of area between the Starbucks and the Zips restaurant. The first question is, it's no longer a Zips, apparently.
I'm sorry?
It's no longer a Zips. It's not a Zips restaurant anymore.
Yeah, that tenant has changed the name.
So you don't own the restaurant. You're leasing the restaurant to a third.
We don't own the operations. No.
You
we
own
own the real estate.
You own the real estate.
Correct.
So there's no opportunity to redevelop that into I happen to live closer to Celtice in Post Falls, and there's a brand new Zips there that looks kind of a very attractive, modern, kind of restaurant-looking property. There's no real opportunity for you to do that as well.
In 18 months, that will be going back to a Zips. In 18 months.
In 18 months.
And it will be an extensive remodel to bring that back to, that tenant will no longer be there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. One other comment, just for conversation, as it relates to the pedestrian-friendly nature of Sherman, you kind of look at the map, and if the Coeur d'Alene Resort is the kind of anchor destination, access from Northwest Boulevard from the west and Sherman Avenue from the east, there's always going to be significant kind of, automobile traffic accessing from those directions. And, I don't see, frankly, I don't see a Starbucks with a drive-through doing anything more than perhaps serving that, kind of automobile traffic that's currently moving through those, particularly from I-90 on Sherman coming into the to the city corridor. I don't imagine it's going to have any additional, although it may generate additional automobile visits. I think that having a Starbucks in place of a gas station and a convenience store that close to the downtown core certainly is an improvement and a substantial upgrade to the community. So I appreciate your efforts to do so, and I look forward to the conversation.
I have a quick question again. So the what is not currently the Zips Burger place, that has a drive-through, correct? Coming in off of, what would that be, 8th? Kind of by the alley off of 8th.
It does.
And then it curves back around and exits out onto Sherman?
It has entrance off of Sherman and off of 8th.
Okay. So you can see the orientation of the building as it's drawn up on that one. There you go. Thank you. On this one diagram, that building is oriented toward the sidewalk. And Hillary, is that considered the pedestrian-oriented preference when it comes to building location?
Yes, so how the building is more fronting the street is more appropriate, and then the
So
parking to the
pushing
side, so the desire to have parking at the rear or to the side.
Right, so that's appropriate because, again, within that 1 or 2 block area that was overlooked, if the Starbucks building could be placed further up and almost mirror the drive-through of Zips, is that allowable presently based on what's in front of us?
Yes, so that's one of the requirements, is that they would have to shift the building forward.
Okay. But that way, at the same time, I'm guessing, at the same time, pushing it forward would then allow it to be a little bit more in compliance with pedestrian-oriented design.
It could, it certainly would be more welcoming to the pedestrians, so they don't have to walk across the big parking lot.
Right, okay.
But the drive-through component would still not be, I guess.
Compliant
yeah,
based
compliant
on
with the
what it is,
pedestrian-oriented
okay.
nature.
Thank you.
Just a comment, I think the drive-through, like you said, is one issue. And we have a process, because I'm on the Design Review Commission as well as my other commissioner here. And I suggest you definitely look at what their regulations are, because, again, what you mentioned, one of the guidelines is having that building closer to, let's say, Sherman, and there's more glass sometimes, and what you can put on a wall. And I'm not saying that this isn't a great idea, but I think they go hand in hand, where you don't want to get into something like this, and then all of a sudden you, oh gosh, I've got to go meet another body of commissioners, and they're going to tell me now I've got to do this. So I highly recommend that you look at those guidelines, regardless what happens here. And I agree that the drive-through is another issue, but the building location might be something that you might have to change. Okay?
Again, I'm struggling a little bit with the timing. You know, if we're talking about, you know, changing a guideline for the 700, 600, and 100, 600, and 700 block, that's a process that takes weeks, months, maybe. In the meantime, we have an active project on our plate, a developer that wants to do something. And so, as we sit here today, it is not a pedestrian-oriented street, correct?
That's section.
And so, I don't know that we have the wherewithal to deny it, in my sense. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm also thinking about just the devil that we know and the opportunity that we might have. That, you know, as Louis and I think Tom, you're leaning the same way, or kind of a well-done design, downtown design conforming project with a Starbucks close to the corner that seeks a balance of pedestrian friendly and has a drive-through that slips through. Can't help but to think that might not be a win-win for everybody.
So if I understand what you just said, we have, if we say okay for the Starbucks drive-through, but we also are saying okay for the 100, 700, 600 block change as well, correct? Is that what we have in front of us?
Well, the request from the planning department is that you would consider expanding the pedestrian-oriented streets. So it wouldn't make sense if you're going to say drive-through is appropriate and then turn around and say the 600 and 700 blocks are pedestrian-oriented. So they kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
And then I guess just to answer Commissioner Engel's question as well, so it is my opinion, and per the code, I have that ability to say if it's a prohibited use additionally from what is listed in the code. So if you were to take the stance that it's not appropriate, then that would be okay. But the question for you this evening is, you know, do you support that, or would you rather say that you want to continue allowing drive-throughs within this block of Sherman?
I think the risk of allowing drive-throughs to occur within that block, unless we can create the pedestrian-friendly sidewalk, you know, that entire downtown area, what's going to happen in the 600 block, you know, where there's those 4 lots that are where Live After 5 is happening right now? I mean, if we don't consider what could happen down the road, who's to say that someone wouldn't want to build another kind of project to put in something else that they would incorporate another drive-through, and then if we don't catch it now, we would end up having to do this all over again. So Because right now, there's nothing in front of us for that section of Sherman, but
Correct, but
It
yeah,
could
there's been
happen.
discussion, so there
Right.
could be.
Well, help me a little bit here. We still have our downtown core, and on page 1, you listed 1 through 5. That exists for the downtown core, of which this uncolored part is part of it. The colored part, we went into more detail in some fashion. I would suggest maybe we do the same fashion in the non-colored area. But in my mind, the downtown core is still, required these 5 items here. And in my mind, the drive-through does not meet the pedestrian and attractive shoppers and so forth, regardless of what color it is. That's why, I support I concur with your determination. I think that the Live After 5 area, which is not colored, that would still, when it comes before, it would still have to meet these things here. That is a pedestrian, supports pedestrian movement, et cetera. So I view this as 2 grandfathered pieces of property for whatever reason. And if they choose to change that, then they have to meet our code. And changing it from removing the gas tanks to putting it in a coffee shop, I understand your argument, but to me it's not an exchange. It's in this fashion until it's changed to anything else. I don't know if that makes any sense. But to me, it's grandfathered in, and we have our authority within the downtown core to deny a drive-through, I believe, if we desire.
Anything else? Okay, we're all deep in thought right now, Hillary.
Are you looking for a motion from us to approve your determination or to disapprove your determination? What is it that you're looking to us for?
Yes, definitely some direction. I think staff was asking, well, I guess there's kind of the 2 parts. So Mr. Fowler is asking for, is a drive-through going to be permitted or not? And then if you say no and support my interpretation, then do you also want to consider expanding the pedestrian-oriented streets in the downtown? And then the other consideration before you is, are drive-throughs different, or should we look at them exactly the same?
So it's 2 different
So there's
steps.
kind of, yeah. So sorry, there's a few questions before you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question here tonight.
And this may sound like a motion, but I want to just kind of run it by you guys real quick. So if we can get the gaps where we're missing the interpretation for pedestrian orientation, personally, I'd like to see the Starbucks go in as long as it meets the guidelines of that pedestrian-oriented plan. So that would force the building to come up to Sherman, and anything else that could happen on that 600 block of Sherman would also be subject to that requirement. And I think at that point in time, then again, it gets back to, should drive-throughs be allowed or not? But again, we see Zips next door where they do have a drive-through, and done properly, I feel a drive-through exiting out on the 7th wouldn't be a bad thing. But that's just, again, that's my opinion on that. But I think it should all start with the pedestrian orientation being extended into those blocks where we have those gaps right now, so we can at least have that in place.
We have we have fairly thorough control, correct me if I'm wrong, at the design review process, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
One of you design review people. I think the reason that got left out years ago is because it was a little bit different animal on that block right there with the existing businesses and the drive-throughs, and it's at the end of the downtown area, rightly or wrongly. I think that's how that was excluded.
If I understand, as I view this as a 2-step process, we either concur or don't concur with the planning director on this specific item. And then the second one is to do additional work on the uncolored portion and maybe even go to East Sherman. So, and we make this determination separately, I think. And if we make a determination, if we approve of your determination, and at a later date when we go through and study this, we can revise that in some fashion for the whole area. If we disapprove of your determination currently, then we have now cast in stone a certain item that we may want to change with further study, which would be harder to do, I believe. So I would humbly propose a motion that we concur in the planning director's determination on this parcel of property.
Okay, so you concur with Hillary that the drive-through is not a permitted use then?
Correct.
Along with the building not being,
Not saying anything about the building. I
just on the drive-through interpretation, okay? And by the way, I don't think this is standing with Hillary or going against Hillary. This is, it's nothing like that, so.
Oh, no, I'm not.
I thought I heard you say something to that effect about whether we stand with your interpretation or not, so don't take
Well, I didn't mean it that way.
Hillary.
As I understand it, she made a determination, and an applicant is protesting that, which is fine. And I just happen to support her determination. I don't say she's right or wrong. Well,
I don't know if she made a determination or not. She has her opinion on it, but she brought it before the Planning Commission, which I think that was a great thing that she did.
I do,
So he
too.
had a chance to air his concerns before us, so. But I appreciate her opinion.
How do we go about if we disagree with staff's opinion? How does that, do we say that, I'm a little confused about how, if we go with Peter saying, well, yes, we approve what staff has said, which means no drive-through, and change the rest of the design guidelines for the mentioned blocks?
No, it doesn't.
The way I look
nothing
at
with
it,
the guidelines, Tom.
I think Hillary gave us her opinion, but this isn't a question of standing with Hillary or not standing with her.
So if we say,
She gave us her
I'm trying
opinion,
to
and
figure out what's a yes
Commissioner-
vote and a no vote do to this.
Well, Commissioner Lutrup's made a motion waiting for a second that we deny this request and not allow the drive-through. That's
Okay, so that's
simple as can be, and we don't have a second to that yet. So if that passes, that's the end of it. If it doesn't pass, somebody else can make a motion.
And just for the approval of the drive-through on this piece of property? Because
I guess there could be other conditions with it.
Just to clarify things, the design review phrases it this way. As far as a prohibited use, any other use that the planning director determines not to comport with the intent of the district as expressed in Section 1. So the motion should be worded in terms of either agreeing with the planning director that the drive-through does not comport with the intent of the district, or the other way would be a motion that the drive-through does comport with the intent of the district. Does that make sense?
Well,
And my motion
part of it does.
that has not got a second is the first part of that purport the staff's recommendation. But it doesn't have a second, so I think we can move on to further discussion.
Is there a second for Commissioner Lutrup's motion? Okay, so I guess that doesn't have a second. All right. Somebody else could make a motion.
Before I make a motion, I'd like to make I think a point, and maybe it's a question. And so if there's not a second, I think the majority here is pretty comfortable. Maybe we've talked a lot about the value, say, of a Starbucks on that corner, done well, in accordance with design review, set close to the street, parking in the back. It looks beautiful. and it's got a tasteful drive-through. Having said all that, and if we had some assurance that that's what we're going to get, I think at least I would be very comfortable in floating that motion. Where I'm nervous here is that our decision is probably not the nice Starbucks guarantee here. And so once we make that decision, Starbucks potentially backs out, and all of a sudden we're looking at a Taco Time on the corner with a drive-through. So we got to be careful. I think we're opening the door for anything that might have a drive-through, correct?
Yeah, you could have a good point there.
Fish fry.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
But my understanding, Hillary, you could object to that. You could say that it's prohibited.
I don't know that I could for a specific business. I think it's more
Once
just
we
the
said
fact
that the Starbucks was allowable, you
Can't tie it to
couldn't go
Right,
back
it's
and say
the
that.
drive-through is the issue here. I
It's
don't-
the drive-through.
Unless we were to say a bank versus, a restaurant or
Understood.
a beverage
Get rid of the
facility.
gas station, but we get a drive-through.
I think that in the event that you did approve a drive-through there, for us to invest in a complete new building, moving it out next to the street, drive-through, it's going to have to be a significant player, either Starbucks or Dutch Bros or somebody of that caliber. Otherwise, it's not going to work for us, and it'll stay a gas station. I think that, I have no control over Starbucks. They've said what they're going to say, and they're interested, and we're in communication. They know I'm here at this meeting tonight. That's all I can say.
Legal question, can we put any condition at all site-specific to Starbucks for this property only?
Well, the only issue before you is an interpretation by the planning director regarding whether a drive-through should be allowed in basically these two blocks between the pedestrian-oriented streets.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been no site plan, no proposal from anybody to build anything yet. This is all a speculation. So really, the only issue before the district is the interpretation of pedestrian-oriented streets and whether the drive-through fits this downtown district.
Even though in front of us, and I hear what you just said, in front of us, we have drawings, pictures, letters saying Starbucks, Starbucks, Starbucks. And if we approve this, saying drive-throughs, I'm looking at it as, well, there's hopefully, more than 50% that there's going to be a Starbucks. If there wasn't, then I guess it should have came before us as, hey, I just want to put a drive-through in, regardless of whatever tenant might or might not be there. So I'm looking at it as a commissioner, well, I've got all this documentation in front of me that makes this look really great. So now that adds another little cloud in my mind on this.
It's kind of similar in a way to when we have a zone change before us, so that a particular business that is really popular can go in, but we know that when we do the zone change, anything can go in that fits that zone. I don't know if it's exactly like that, but it sounds like it's kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from the Starbucks, I think a lot of us are looking at whether it's a Starbucks or some other use. I think we're looking at the trade-off to get rid of that gas station that doesn't really fit on the corner and is kind of poorly sited there and doesn't have proper stacking room or maneuvering room there, and trading that for a building that's pedestrian-oriented and fits the downtown better with a drive-through window.
Okay,
But
that makes sense.
But the Starbucks is the thing that really catches your eye, though. And I know Starbucks has been looking probably for a dozen years for a downtown location off and on. So I don't know what to say about whether it's Starbucks or not Starbucks.
Okay.
Starbucks may not be around forever.
I think having said all of that, whatever business might end up there. And the message I think we're saying here, and I would encourage you, if this moves forward, to look at the design regs early and often and take back the the downtown design regulations and guidelines are pretty strong, and there'd have to be some significant change there with respect to landscaping, how the walls are done, the window fenestration, all that kind of stuff has to. I think if it meets the downtown design guidelines, it's probably going to be a pretty good project, regardless of whether it's a Dutch Brothers, maybe even a Taco Bell or whatever. If it were done well, would be an improvement over what we have there now. And I don't know that the drive-through makes or breaks it in terms of the qualitative fit with the downtown. So I would motion that the interpretation is that allowance of the drive-through in this location does not detract from the existing vehicular-oriented street. I'm not sure that's the right motion.
I know what you think, but what's the proper motion? That it conforms, or what is the proper motion?
I would say that the motion would be that that a drive-through would comport with the intent of the downtown district at that location.
At that particular location.
So the motion is that allowance of a drive-through at that location would not...
Would comport with the intent of the district.
What he said. Correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so second by Rumpler. I think in a certain way we're playing the odds on this thing, because we have a non-conforming use with a gas station and convenience store that's not the best designed right there, that's been there forever, but it's grandfathered in. So I think those of us that are looking at supporting this motion think that we get something a lot more positive for the downtown than what's there right now, better conforming with the downtown. And I guess design review would have pretty tight control over the design of that building and the looks of it and so forth, the design of it. So we're playing the odds on that. There is a possibility, even if this motion wasn't approved, that gas station would be economically viable, and something would go in there anyway without the drive-in window that might be better conforming to the downtown. So you're kind of playing the odds on what the best is for the downtown. Obviously, something is probably going to happen. I don't know if the tenant's going to renew their lease, or if they're out of there when the lease is up. And then something totally different will go in, or could be another operator that takes over the convenience store and the gas station, and it keeps going.
Mr. Chair, I concur with your sentiment, and I'm always reminded by the adage, never let perfect be the enemy of good. The challenge here is, of course, if we don't do this, then we're left with fundamentally we're left with a gas station convenience store. If we don't allow the drive-through use, we don't have the opportunity potentially for a Starbucks. So the math seems to me fairly straightforward. If we don't do this, we don't get the Starbucks, and we get left with a use that is certainly not the highest and best use for the property and for the quality of the downtown core. So I support Commissioner Engel's motion.
And one other comment regarding the Design Review Commission, I would highly recommend, because I know Starbucks probably has a great amount of input on their design, that you talk to Starbucks, whomever, and let them know we have something in place that would change what this picture represents.
Sure.
To help you out. Okay?
Absolutely.
Great.
We just don't want a gas station and convenience store with a drive-through window.
You won't have that.
Okay. That's on the record. Any more discussion? Okay. Okay, so everyone understands the motion. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the ayes have it. It's the motion is approved, that, whatever you said, I'm trying to think how to word that now. The motion is approved on I-318 that the drive-through window at this particular location would be in conformance with the downtown policies. Thank you for bringing that forward, Heather. I mean, Hillary, I'm sorry. So, we have one more. City of Coeur d'Alene is the applicant.
Is there a second action she's asking of us, though, should we do an additional study?
Well, we can go back to that.
I guess you wouldn't on that block, now that you've made that determination, but if you would like staff to
We
look
wouldn't
at
on that block now, because
other parts of the downtown.
Thank you.
The first, to First
The other
Avenue.
streets, you might want to, we
I
can
think
certainly.
That's
all
kind
the
of a
other
slam
streets-
dunk. It's all done anyway.
All the other streets that you mentioned, we could, you want a motion or something to go ahead and
Just
put?
first.
Well, that's not on
Bring
the
it down
agenda
first.
for tonight, is it?
It was part of the discussion in the staff report, but we could bring that forward maybe as a separate item for discussion at workshop.
Yeah, whatever those streets were that you had on the screen a little while ago.
Oh, you're moving to, you mean front and expanding
Correct.
it to
Yep.
front
Mhm.
and
And expanding it west on
Lakeside
Sherman,
and
Lakeside.
down to
Right.
First
Correct.
and
I agree, it's not on the agenda to take action tonight, but as far as a show of support to move forward
I
with,
think we should.
And if you'd like to add Sixth
With-
Street,
with-
yeah,
with,
not 700 or 700 block, but if you want to add the 600 block for that.
And if we could extend it, the further down East Sherman, the better, if at all possible.
That would
So we make
probably
it a
be
larger-
addressed as a separate zoning district as we move forward, but we certainly should look at it
But
with the
if we sort
commission.
of I think there's a tie-in between the two in some fashion. I don't
there
know.
probably is, but I think this could get too big that we may not, it may get a little overwhelming, so I think we should, I understand what you're saying, but I think we should give her the go-ahead on adding these other, bringing forward, studying adding these other streets which were mentioned earlier on that slide up there.
The 100 and the 600 then.
Okay.
I saw several different streets there, yeah. There
And
was,
then the block north and south.
Do you want me to
wasn't
bring
there
that slide?
Lakeside in front,
Would you like that slide back up? I can pull it up.
if you want to, sure.
Helpful, okay. There you go.
So, does somebody want to make a motion then that the staff pursue adding these streets to the pedestrian
So-
walking area?
So move.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that's a unanimous. So when you have the time, you could put that in order with the other things you're working on, and
Okay.
we can do that. And I think you need to do everything you wisely mentioned, talking to the Downtown Association and getting the word out. And I would think we should have some sort of a public hearing, so there's a public process, and we can get people's opinion on that at such point this comes forward. Would everybody agree with that?
Yes,
Okay,
at least I do.
great, thank you. Thank you, Hillary.
You're welcome.
So, number 3 on the administrative items here, this is the City of Coeur d'Alene interpretation of fences in the downtown overlay east side zoning district, administrative item I-4-16.
Okay, well, hopefully this one will be a little faster for you.
Hopefully.
All right. So the request this evening is for the Planning Commission to weigh in on fences in this DOE, so Downtown Overlay East Side Zoning District. So this is one of the infill districts that we have in the downtown area. The boundaries are shown on this map, but generally it's 8th Street down. It splits between Mullen and Bancroft on the alley until it gets to 10th Street, goes down to Bancroft up 11th, and then it splits the alley up here between Lakeside, Coeur d'Alene Avenue, and then there's this little pocket south of City Hall and the library. So there are some fence guidelines in place as part of the design standards, and how they're worded, it says they must be met. The first guideline speaks to fences being required to be visually transparent if they are adjacent to public streets. And there's some examples. This is the one included in the design guidelines showing what it's supposed to be. However, as you look through the neighborhood, there, even before the design guidelines were adopted, there were a lot of opaque privacy fences throughout the zoning district. And there have also been some newer ones that have been built in recent years that are not in compliance with the design guidelines, and some that are being proposed to be constructed that would not be visually transparent. And so wanted to bring this forward for your input to see if maybe we should clarify that maybe that's just in the front yard setback where they should be visually transparent, to be more of kind of that picket fence style that is prevalent in the neighborhood versus fences that happen to be on the side yards where people would want some privacy. So I'll kind of walk you through this. So there are a number of compliant fences. Again, they're largely are ones that are kind of in that front yard setback along the street. There's some other ones. This Blackwell House has recently built a fence. They had one that was damaged in the storm. They replaced it. The one before was kind of solid privacy fence. They do have events there because it's the bed and breakfast, and so I was able to do a design departure for them for this fence. While it's not visually transparent, you actually can see through it to a degree, and it's attractive and meets all the criteria to do a design departure, so that is compliant. And then there are quite a few non-compliant. There's lots of chain link fences, some with slats, some without. There's kind of the solid vinyl fences. This one you can't really see, but it's just a solid wood privacy fence. Some other ones that look like that. And then we have a few where they're kind of compliant, especially in the front yard setback, and then they have the privacy fences. And so thought maybe it's appropriate to come to you to see if maybe we should clarify how this should be applied. Should we require that all fences are supposed to be visually transparent, or should we really look and just say the ones in the front yard setback should be, and then otherwise allow the privacy fences? And the other two guidelines would not be impacted. So that would be chain link fences would still be prohibited. So we aren't going to necessarily go after the ones that were there before the guidelines, but any new chain link fences would be prohibited. And then the other one for stepping the fences, so the design to be more kind of step down versus just straight across. So those would remain intact. So the interpretation is solely on this guideline number one. There was also a recent approval of a project that went through Design Review Commission on Mullen, where a fence that was not visually transparent was approved because it was closer to the building. So again, it's kind of this type of interpretation would allow that fence to also be compliant. So when is your input this evening?
So you're saying that even the side fences have to be visually transparent?
How it's written, yep. Anytime it's adjacent to a street, it's supposed to be visually transparent.
Oh, you mean on a corner lot?
Corner lots, yep. And, depending on how adjacent is interpreted, our former legal, Warren Wilson, had said adjacent was even across the street. So if it was saying basically any fence in the district would be required to be visually transparent. But if you took to kind of the looser interpretation, yes, any side yard that's abutting a street, any front yard fence, all of those would be required to be visually transparent under the guidelines as strictly interpreted.
Mr. Chair, did we go through a process, getting community input and developing the guideline?
Yeah.
So if we're going to modify the guideline, shouldn't we have more community input?
Well, we're just doing an interpretation. But I take it someone's asked to put a side obscuring fence in, or you're saying?
Correct, and there's been, I think, 3 that have just gone up recently with new construction homes that are privacy fences, side obscuring. They're attractive fences, but yes, and then there's another one that was in the process, and side yards, basically.
Side yards.
Let's see if we can.
For me personally, I can see why the front yard needs to be visually transparent. But I mean, a lot of people like side obscuring side yard fences, and
Backyard.
sometimes it adds, when a new use goes in,
This is one of the new ones.
a new use or a different house or something goes in, actually, for the people that are already pre-existing there, it adds a layer of protection and privacy for the existing neighbors.
but we have current guidelines. And what you're asking us to interpret our own guidelines?
Correct. So the interpretation I'm asking you to make is that you would only require visually transparent in the front yard setback. So anytime someone has a fence that's, between the sidewalk and the front of the house and that 20-foot front yard setback, that would need to be the visually transparent. Otherwise, the side yard fences could be the solid privacy fence. Here's an example on this here. This one's actually across from the library. So this is abutting 8th, and then this is in the alley. But if you were to take a strict interpretation, even this rear one, because it's kind of adjacent to the street, would need to be visually transparent.
So help me, we're supposed to interpret strictly or unstrictly, or I'm not clear, maybe it reflects back on our previous item, not clear what we're being asked of. We have certain guidelines in place. You're to interpret those guidelines.
Right.
And in your interpretation, you make a determination, and the applicant always has the ability, if they disagree with you, to come before us.
Mm-hmm.
And if they disagree with us, they can come before the city council. So have you made a determination
My
yet?
understanding of when this was developed, the design guidelines, that it probably the intent was more that it would just be in the front yard setback, because I think in the area we live, people like having privacy, especially for their side yards and rear yards. And so I believe that to say it's in the front yard setback makes sense with how it's written. But if you were to just read through it as it is, it's any fence adjacent to a public street is supposed to be visually transparent. So if you agree with this interpretation to clarify it, I think we probably, again, should modify design guidelines to make it clear that it's just in that front yard setback.
And this is just for projects going forward, and it's also only in the downtown east overlay.
Correct. It's only in the zoning district.
Not in the midtown overlay or the downtown north.
Nope, it's just this zoning district.
So, Hillary, I think pictures are worth 1,000 words. Page 4 of 5 of your staff report, which is an excerpt of the East Overlay guideline, has 3 pictures there. And I think you picked those pictures very deliberately.
Right.
To illustrate really what we're trying to get a handle on. And having, little 4-foot walls opaque right against the sidewalk just looks terrible. And so in these special districts, if you will, while some would see design guidelines as kind of heavy-handed, and they can be, they protect values and all that sort of thing if done well. So I think these pictures illustrate the intent, which is being able to see visually through them in the front yard only. And as you say, it's valuable for people, regardless of where they live, to have almost a right to some privacy. So with that, to start the ball rolling, I would just motion that we concur with staff's opinion that fences within the front yard setback should be held to the visually transparent requirement, but that fences outside the front yard setback can be opaque. Which is your recommendation?
I'll second that motion.
Well, we're kind of discussing with staff right now. We have somebody to testify on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped the
Yeah,
gun.
right now,
Do we have someone that is here this evening?
My apology. I
okay.
didn't know this was a hearing.
Lynn, you wanted to testify on this one, right? Yes. Okay, hold on just a minute. Okay, so right now.
My apology.
Well, right now, no, we're just kind of doing our thing, and we're discussing this with staff right now, but we're just not ready for a motion.
And on corner houses, it would be all outside facing corners would have to be transparent then too.
So in my proposed interpretation, no.
No.
It would just be if it's in
So
the
you
front
could
yard
choose
setback.
one
So if
side
it's a-
street to be solid.
Correct, except in the front yard setback, that fence would have to be visually transparent.
whichever
Till
way
they
your
get
door
to the
faces.
where the house is, the rest of that side yard could be opaque privacy fence.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for right now? Okay, thanks, Hillary.
You're welcome.
Lynn, you want to come up? Just state, you can just state your name there for the record.
My name's Lynn Schwindel, and I live in the Midtown overlay. And I've been studying an issue of replacing my fence, and I wanted to specifically address item number 3, where it says prohibited. Well, to me, that term industrial is very subjective. Some industrial fences look nice, some don't. Types of materials such as, and they spell out chain link specifically, are not allowed. So I started investigating replacing my fence here this spring, and I have an old field fence that was put up in 1978. It's in need of repair. So I got an estimate on a chain link, a black one, no slats, 4 feet high across the front. You can see through it. To me, they're a nice looking fence. Capone's just put up a new fence, and it's, I guess it would be acceptable to that, but they're 1-inch square posts, 4 feet high, looks very nice. I think that's industrial, but it looks nice. But when I looked into getting that type of a fence, they cost 3 times as much money as the chain link, and I think the chain link looks fine. So that's why I came down here tonight, because when I visited the planning department last week, I found out that they're going to address this subject tonight. So I wanted to express my opinion on this. Now, I have another option, which I call the 5-year 20% rule, where I can repair 20% over a 5-year period with just some new field fence and a can of black spray paint. I guess that's what I'd have to do. So I just think that item 3 is too restrictive. And in the Midtown overlay, which it goes from Indiana to Harrison, from 4th over to Government Way, I would guess that 99.9% of those residents don't know about this rule. And if they wanted to enhance their property, they'd be up like me in the same position. So that's why I wanted to come down and talk to you about that tonight and that issue. And this document also says it infill overlays for all districts, the Midtown, the Downtown North, the Downtown East. It says in here that that fence rule applies to all 3 overlays, so that if you do something to one, I think you should do it to the other 2. Okay, any questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, questions of Mr. Schwindel? Nope. Okay, thank you, Lynn. Did anyone else out there want to testify on this matter? Okay, just checking. Okay. So we're back to this again.
So let me understand this correct. Mr. Ingalls was thinking about making a motion. Ms. Swindell, you heard that motion. Is that in agreement with what you're proposing? Does that resolve your issue?
Well, no, because I think that...
I think we're, okay. He got you into trouble. You need to come up.
I'm sorry, I should have...
Mike.
No, my issue is in number 3, the term industrial, I think, is very subjective. And you're not giving the homeowners, I guess, enough leeway. Now, I agree that with the opaque, being able to see through is fine, okay? That's fine. But you're forcing the homeowner to, I think, spend more money than is necessary to have a nice-looking fence.
And when this was developed, we understood that, I assume.
So like in my case, I wanted to improve the looks of the property, but like I say, I've got I'll probably just move on to another project.
My interest is concerns process. We go through a certain process and we come up with this visual impact, whether, whatever the rules may be. And staff comes in and says, well, it's one area that we have an issue with and we want a determination, and so we can give that. Then you come up and back and say, well, there's broader concerns about this visual impact than just the side fences. Your concern is about the entire, as I saw it, the entire program, the visual impact of all the fences in the area. And that's, if we're to address that, I would think that we want to go through a process that was fairly similar to the process we used to come up with the policy in the first place.
In my opinion, the process, I could see, but I think what they had in mind when they did that was for commercial properties and not residential.
And it could have well been. I don't know. I wasn't here then. But it's just a process of some fashion. I think what we're all trying to do is make sure that the community that we're affecting is aware of what we're considering, so they can come before us and give us, the benefit of their thinking and thoughts and so forth.
That's why I mentioned that, because I think I'd say 99% of homeowners don't realize item number 3.
Thank you.
But commercial probably would be. Okay, any questions?
No. You've answered. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I totally respect what Mr. Swindell just said and his position and all of that. I value your time in coming down and sharing that with us. To look at all the design guidelines and for Midtown and the others and take a look at all of this globally, I think is another day, and it may have merits. But the item before us, and to be responsive, our duty here, I hope you appreciate, is to respond to the staff report that we have, which is a very specific interpretation, not to bring up the matter of whether we're going to redo design guidelines, but the decision point is very specific to the east side DOE zoning district only. And so what we would do there in the form of the motion that I'm going to reiterate, it doesn't help others in the other districts, but it doesn't hurt them. It may help them a little bit. It may not get them completely where they want to go. But again, I think to move forward, we should be responsive to the very specific decision point. And so I would reiterate the motion to concur with staff's opinion that fences within the front yard setback should be held to the visually transparent requirement, but that the fences outside the front yard setback can be opaque.
I'll second that again.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
have a second by Fleming.
Yeah.
And do you still concur with the recommendations about chain link and industrial fences? And
I'm saying no. I'm saying that's another day. That's outside the scope of
Right.
what was put
So
in front of us.
For now, that's what it is. Okay, just checking. Is there any other comments or discussion on this?
I do think the wire industrial, it's not aesthetically pleasing. It is inner city. It's not really desirable. It sort of says pit bull. And I just don't think they're very attractive. And yes, they are cheaper, and that's why they exist in such large quantity.
You're
I
talking about
understand
chain
that.
link?
Economics, yes, it's about economics and at the end of the day. And I understand that. And if it's your rear fence facing the back, laneway, it's possible. You can have it there, but I don't see it on the front yard. It just sounds like inner city LA to me. It's just not desirable. And I don't think it adds the aesthetic to resale of the house even. So I think it's detrimental. I tend to agree with all these design guidelines.
I just throw in, I have seen CCNRs where they'll prohibit galvanized chain link fence, but they'll allow vinyl coated fence. That's probably for another day.
Splitting hairs,
But
yes.
That's
splitting
probably for
hairs.
another day, but I have seen that.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion on this motion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So, I guess that's approved, item I-4-16, and I guess that is saying visually see-through on the front yard setback, and you can have, wood or vinyl or whatever site obscuring on the sidelines. Okay? I think we did that a little bit faster than the last one. Not a lot faster, but a little bit faster. Okay, so next, we have two public hearings, and these are quasi-judicial. The first is the City of Coeur d'Alene. The location is Blackwell Island. This is a proposed 1.83 acre annexation from county restricted residential to city C-17. And I think I spoke too soon. This particular one, the next two are quasi-judicial. This one is legislative. Item A2-16.
I thought we just said. Yeah, this is legislative.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I looked at the other two, and it jumped out at me, and then as
Okay.
I'm reading, I see that this is legislative. So anyway, I think I got all that. So,
Okay.
Mike, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. This is item number A-2-16, application of the City of Coeur d'Alene for request for an annexation of approximately 1.83 acres of city-owned land in conjunction with zoning approval from county restricted residential to C-17 zoning district on property immediately southwest of Blackwell RV Park, 800 South Marina Drive. The city is in the process of evaluating some of their surplus parcels of land so that they may be sold off in order to help finance future improvements to City Hall. If this annexation is approved, then this is just one of 3 pieces of land that the city may be placing up for sale. As you can see, the property is highlighted here in red. To the north is an RV park, to the south is a marina, and to the east is the Spokane River. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of the property. You can see it's highlighted in red, and the city limits are highlighted here in green. There's a 30-foot access easement strip here that's been platted or on the deeds, and it's been recorded for access to this property to the north. There's also a utility easement, public utility easement with the water main going through this property. Here is a survey of the property showing the city limits, and with these squares showing the city limits and the boundary lines, and the utility easements will go through the center. Here's a 1958 aerial photograph of the property showing what used to be there. This used to be a bridge that crossed the river at this location. And the subject property is now an old right-of-way, abandoned right-of-way that's sitting there. It's 100 feet wide, and it's where the bridge used to connect. The surrounding zoning. To the north, you have C-17 PUD, a C-17 LPUD, so you got commercial uses to the north, and to the south is county commercial. This is a county zoning map showing how the county has zoned the property out. And this, the restricted residential is located here and here, and this is the commercial. Here's some site photos of the property. This is at the very west part of the property looking east towards the river. And this is halfway through the property looking east towards the river. And this is close to the very end of the property looking towards the river, and this is the old road that's still there. And this is just basically turning around and looking west along that road. There are 4 findings that must be met in order to approve an annexation. The first one is finding B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies. The 2007 comprehensive plan indicates this area is in the Spokane River District. Subject property is located here, highlighted in white, and this is in the stable established area. Stable established areas are areas where the character of the neighborhoods has largely been established and in general should be maintained. The street network, the number of building lots, and general land uses are not expected to change greatly. The Spokane District area in the future is going to be an area that's generally envisioned to be a mixed-use neighborhoods consisting of housing, commercial, retail, services, activities that embrace the aesthetics of the proximity to the Spokane River. As the mills are removed to make way for new development, the river shoreline is sure to change dramatically. Some future characteristics will be various commercial, residential, and mixed uses. Public access should be provided to the river. The open spaces, parks, pedestrian and bicycle connections, and other public spaces will be provided throughout, especially adjacent to the Spokane River. The scale of development will be urban in nature, promoting multimodal connectivity to downtown. Comprehensive plan objectives. Objective 1.01 talks about the environment. 1.02 is water quality, and 1.03 waterfront development. Objective 1.05 talks to protect the vistas, and 4.03 is project financing. Finding B9, that public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. The utility project manager has indicated that the wastewater does not have any conditions on this annexation as proposed. The water superintendent has indicated that there is adequate capacity in the public water system to support the proposed annexation of the specific property on Backwell Island. There is an existing 12-inch water main on the property with a dedicated public utility easement, and no permanent structures other than roadways, curbs, and sidewalks may be located within the dedicated public utility easement. Stormwater and streets. The engineer and project managers indicated that stormwater and street improvements will be addressed through the building permit process at the time of development on the subject property. Fire has indicated that this would not impact the fire department. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. The site is generally flat, surrounded by an RV park use to the north, marina use to the south and west, and the Spokane River to the east. There are no topographical or other physical constraints that would make the subject property unsuitable for the annexation request. And finally, finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and or existing land uses. The engineering project manager has indicated that there's a private street that connects to US 95 and that the potential impacts are not needed to be addressed at this time. The C7 district is intended as a broad spectrum commercial district that permits limited service, wholesale, retail, and heavy commercial, in addition to allowing residential development. This is just a list of a few of the principal uses that are permitted in the C17 district. The full list is on page 4 and 5 of your staff report. I'll just read a couple of these. Commercial recreation, food and beverage stores, general service construction, mini storage facilities, retail gasoline sales, specialty retail sales. The existing land use map. This is the city existing land use map, and it shows commercial uses to the north. The decision point tonight is provide a recommendation to the City Council regarding the annexation of approximately 1.83 acres of city-owned land in conjunction with zoning approval from county restricted residential to City C17. The Planning Commission must consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. You know, I think there's some of us on here that remember going over that old right-of-way when the bridge was in there. Any questions of Mike? Okay. Thanks, very good. Okay. I have some people signed up to testify. Let's see, if you're here to testify on this tonight, I need you just to step up to the podium and then state your name, and you have 5 minutes to testify. Mark Hall, come on up.
Hello.
Hi. How are
Mark
you doing?
Hall. I reside at 800 Marina Drive, the RV park. At one time, this property actually belonged to me. It was part of the annexation agreement that I dedicate this property to the city. At the time, it was contemplated to be a bicycle path, and I think we know that's probably not going to happen. But I have a 30-foot easement on the roadway coming into the property. I have an agreement with the city that I maintain that road to city standards, and it turns out the roadway is actually 12 feet wider than my easement. Also, the property is in the 100-year floodplain. The important thing for me is to maintain access to that, to my RV park using the old Highway 95. And I'm not opposed to the sale of the property in the future or the zoning as long as I can maintain access on that road.
Do you currently have access?
I'm sorry?
Do you currently have access on that road?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I have
It's dedicated to you?
That's his entry.
It's an easement that's recorded.
So whatever we do will not affect that?
Except for it turns out that the roadway there's 12 feet of the roadway that I don't have an easement on. But I have an agreement to use the roadway with the city. And I don't know that that would extend to any future owner. I don't have a clarification on that. But I've been maintaining the road. I resurfaced it a few years ago, and it's a well-maintained road.
So if you lost that 12 feet, that would greatly curtail the use of your property?
It would make it very difficult for me to get in and out of the property, yes.
Is there another access?
No, there's not.
That's the sole entry and egress.
Right, and it's my opinion that the intent was to give me an easement on the road, but somehow I lost 12 feet of that particular old Highway 95.
Where's the 12-foot chunk
Yeah,
at?
could you show that on the
12-foot
could staff show us
chunk?
that?
It's really hard to tell, but it's between my easement and the utility easement. So,
He's got 30 feet from here to here, and this road is 43 feet. So his easement,
Sort of stops.
the road has been built out wider
well,
than the 30 feet.
it was always wide.
Okay.
Yeah, it existed as the highway before the current highway bridge was moved.
Well, so you're saying the 12 feet runs all along
The entire length of the 12 feet.
so it's between your RV park and the road.
No, it's between, I have 30 feet from my property extending into the road. There's 12 feet more of the road that I don't have an easement on. And on the other side of the road, to the south, is the 12-inch water main and power line easement.
So you need more than 30 feet?
Yeah,
You need 48.
I need 42 feet.
42.
It's an odd strip of land because there's a utility easement in between that 12 feet, and I don't know how far the utility easement extends. And that might be why I only got 30 feet, because I'm abutting the water utility easement.
When I think our function in this is to approve the recommendation of the zoning prior to annexation. We're fairly limited in what we do. And,
Certainly.
so then
Just to make you aware of that, and that it is in the 100-year floodplain.
Yeah.
It's actually below the 100-year floodplain by quite a bit. Yeah.
A lot of that is out there.
Pretty soggy.
My time's up unless you have any questions.
Any other questions for this gentleman? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Nice to see you. Thanks for your input. Okay, I have Ann Hall. You don't wish to testify? Okay. And Julie, I can't quite read the last name on Fairmont Loop. Julie, come on down to state your name for the record there. Sorry about that.
I'm Julie Del Ceso, for the record.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a lot of history with this strip of land, but one of the things I was pretty interested in is that tonight I understand you have the choice to recommend whether the applicant, who is the city, wants to annex their own property into the city and recommend zoning. So years ago, there was a proposal by the applicant who owns the marina to develop high-rises that would look right over NIC and across the river. So they would face out from the beach, and they looked exactly like the building that's at Potlatch Hill. There were 3 of them. So if you're looking at radical changes to the shoreline and not having height restrictions, or I don't know what they are in the city, maybe you do have them, but I think there's going to be some high-rises right there. And I heard something about your view shed. Did I? So I would say consider, if you annex to one of the owners on the island, what the plan is going to be. And the construction plan there is regulated by the Army Corps of Engineers as the lead agent for the marina owner. And I won't get into that too much, but they just got a violation for a site disturbance. No silt fences adjacent to the red line where they're moving earth for 31 acres. So, oh, cool, thank you. So their violation was right here. That would be for this applicant on this 31-acre parcel. So anyway, back to annexation. I had a question about whether, or if I'm allowed to ask the question, if they can force annexation if the city is surrounded by, if the parcel is surrounded by other annexed pieces in the city. Can an applicant force an annexation?
Yes, state statutes allow, excuse me, they don't like to call it forced annexation, but this isn't one of those cases because the city property is not, well, it's obviously it's city-owned, so we wouldn't force ourselves, but it's not surrounded on all sides. If the property is surrounded on all sides by city limits, then a city could choose to annex it in.
Okay, okay. Okay, so I am opposed to doing a pre-sale on this because it's public water access. And even if it's only a postage stamp, that's kind of like one of the beaches off 12th Street in town that has one of the city discharge pipes there. It's a postage stamp, the old Sanders Beach area. So it's extremely valuable. There's a lot of science happening through the U of I. They have a new waterkeeper program on Lake Coeur d'Alene. They'd love to have their vessel there. It could be rented out. Do you know what slips rent for? That could be income to the city. So I would really ask that the city even consider a citizen group for 30 to 60 days to come up with some public use options before you sell off waterfront public access that's already in the city. It already has public utilities. It was designated to be bicycle, pedestrian in previous negotiations. And it's just sad to see the gradual imperialism that's happening on the north end of the lake. So I didn't know Marina Drive was totally private, but I have a lot of respect for the Centennial Trail Foundation, and this is from 2007. I could submit to the record a proposed bridge for a future trail system that they wanted to do there. But, you know, it was like $3.5 million, and the committee idea kind of dropped by the wayside. However, a loop for a kayak put in there would be awesome. It wouldn't cost anything, it could be a turnaround, and it could encourage the applicants to maybe have a public bathroom. There's going to be over 330 boat slips. There's going to be a private yacht marina show house that just can slide the boats right into where they dredge out a new deep marina. So there's big plans out there, and I just, you know, I don't know how many bake sales it would take to come up with the money that you might get for that parcel. But I saw some minutes from City Council, and it says here there was a motion by Gookin to recommend disposal of surplus real property. And the staff was directed to obtain an appraisal on Blackwell property. And I really can't believe we would dispose of public access like that. It's already owned by the city. There's already utility allotments. There's already recreational uses there. Albeit the the pedestrian bridge probably isn't going to happen. I remember how long it took to build this library, how many committees worked to make this library happen. It took years. My child's whole childhood, we went to the other library, and it's beautiful here. So I have an old historical picture from the museum of when Fort Sherman, the barracks were where NIC is, and there's actual Indian teepees right where the Worley Highway right-of-way is. So it hasn't always been industrial. I mean, there are people that have short memories. And there's even a picture here of a lumber company that was there at one point. But I just also have a picture of the 1927 bridge. And there's pictures, I have another picture that's got some horses going over that bridge. So the Worley right-of-way was paid for by public dollars. I have a copy of it here. It was a highway, just like Front Street was paid for by public dollars. And let's see here. Dedicated public roadway, Blackwell Island, shown and designated. Then they have all the lots and deeds and township stuff. And it says, as shown on the plat of Fort Sherman Abandoned Military Reservation, approved by the U.S. Department of Interior. So, you know, I don't know what it appraised for. I would be very curious, and I was trying to find Troy this week, but I understand he had a family urgency, so he was out of the finance department. But I know that not all properties are equal, and that there's a lot of internal discussion that I'm not privy to about, you know, where you would come up with funds to update your offices and such. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, I really respect volunteers. And I loved working with Dick Smart, who helped get the educational corridor map together where the Blackwell Island public right-of-way was included in the corridor. And so I find that it would be kind of insulting to all the work people did to do the preliminary vestings to get this publicly acknowledged as value. I have stacks of letters, maybe not stacks. I probably have 8 letters, City of Liberty Lake, all kinds of groups that supported public use of this existing right-of-way. And they're dated like 2007, 2009. But I was informed because this is legislative that I would probably have to give away all my maps here and pictures. So I really don't want to submit those to the record, but I'd be happy to talk to anybody about them. And I have the plat for the proposed development there by Marina Yacht Club, I believe is the applicant formally. So in summary, thank you for listening, and I just wanted to say that the city should stop enabling the privatization on this whole side of Blackwell Island. And people say, well, you can go to the NIC beach with your kayak, or you can go to the BLM place with your kayak. But the applicant has created quite a traffic issue out there. There's not a turnout for boats coming from the public. Those are secondary issues, I realize. But if you're looking at affecting that island, I would encourage a more comprehensive awareness of what's going on out there. And I think I could submit this letter from 2009, or I could maybe get a copy of problems with proposed private road and right-of-way issues that might bear on your decision.
Well, ma'am, I thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our scope of what we do is fairly limited here on deciding on the zoning for the annexation. The city council will do the actual annexation, and then the city council will decide whether or not to dispose of this as excess property. So you may want to keep your information together and at some point talk to the city council about that as this moves on and they formulate their decision on what they want to do with this property. But I appreciate your testimony. Thanks for coming down.
Mr. Chair,
Okay. Does anyone else want to testify on this matter here? Okay, go ahead.
I have a question. Absent the annexation, the city still maintains control of this property, can sell it any time they wish. They go through it. They're just saying that if the zoning is changed and we decide to sell it, we may be able to sell it for more money if it's zoned something other than county commercial. Okay.
That's correct, yes. And if it is sold, the council would have to determine that they want to surplus it, and then it would have to go through that formal process.
So all we're doing,
where there
like
would
the
be
chair
public
said, is
input.
if you decide to annex this to the city, Mr. City, Madam City, you will. This is the zoning we will approve.
But it probably needs to be in the city to have access to utilities to make it more valuable.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean,
you know,
it's a good business move on the property owner's part to come
Right.
into the city.
Right. It gets confusing when the property owner is the city that wants to annex it into the city. But it's essentially, yeah, like you say, it's a property owner making a business move. And ultimately, they'll decide what to do with it, to dispose of it or keep it or what they'll do. So that doesn't change the ownership just because it's annexed in. So is anyone working on a motion for this? Having said all that?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Okay. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on June 14, 2016, and there being present person request for approval of item A-2-16, a request for zoning prior to annexation from county restricted residential to city C-17 commercial at 17 units per acre. Applicant is the city of Coeur d'Alene. Property is immediately southwest of the Blackwell Island RV Park, 800 South Marina Drive. I would adopt B1 through B7, B8, that the proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. I would adopt Objective 103, waterfront development, Objective 104, waterfront development as well. Goal number 4 I would adopt, which would be Objective 403, project financing, manage in-house finances. Finding B9, the public facilities and utilities are available and adequate for proposed use regarding stormwater, streets, water, sewer. and fire as stated in the, by staff in the report. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do make it suitable for the request at this time. Basically, the physical characteristics, it's a flat piece of property surrounded by a RV park and marina uses to the south and west, and the Spokane River to the east. Finding B11, that the proposal would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood characteristic, and/or existing land uses, as stated in the staff report regarding traffic, neighborhood characteristic, existing land uses. The Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of the City of Coeur d'Alene for zoning prior to annexation, as described in the application, should be approved. Suggested provisions for the inclusion of the annexation agreement are as follows. There are none. That is my findings.
Is there a motion for that? I mean, is there a second for that motion?
I will second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a second by Rumpler. Any discussion? Okay, time for roll call.
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Lutrip?
Yes.
Messina?
Yes.
Rumpler?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
All right, so that passes unanimously. Legislative item A-2-16. Does anyone feel the need for a quick 5-minute break, or are we doing okay? Okay? All right,
We're almost there. We're over the hump.
just checking. All right, I'm just checking.
Or for your cocktail.
Okay, so we're down to the quasi judicial hearings. Does any commissioner have a conflict to declare on either of these items?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe I have a conflict. I just would mention that I live in Coeur d'Alene Place. I recently bought a home there. I have no ongoing business relationship with the applicant whatsoever.
Okay, so on the quasi judicial hearing, we'll do a staff report, and then the applicant will have up to 30 minutes if they need it for their presentation. Then members of the audience will have 5 minutes to testify, and then there'll be some time at the end for rebuttal by the applicant. And I'll bet Sean is doing the staff report on this one.
I am. All right. Thank you, Planning Commission. We have made it to the bitter end. Thank you.
Almost.
All right. So this is a two-part application. There is a subdivision as well as a PUD modification. You can see that the subdivision is a modification of the original subdivision, which was Boulevard's second edition, and then the PUD is a modification of the original PUD clear back from 1994. So the applicant is Greenstone Kootenai, Roman numeral number 2. I just discussed the subject as well as I'm going to describe the location. It's a hair over 14 acres south of Hanley, north of La Rochelle, and east of Atlas. I just discussed this. Going further, the request would allow for 67 residential lots in 3 phases. They are requesting a private gated street, streets. There's 2 gates, one to the north and one to the south proposed, in an area commonly known as Coeur d'Alene Place. So a little bit of background here. You can see the original annexation for the first part of Coeur d'Alene Place happened in 1992, as well as the subsequent approvals. You can see every single one has been approved from 1992 through 2013. And moving on to the request. Here's an aerial photo of the subject property. We have Hanley, La Rochelle down here, and then Atlas flanking the west side. So this blank screen, if you've remembered presentations of me in the past, I separate them out between the subdivision and the PUD, so that's what I've done here. We're moving on to the subdivision. Here are the findings that are required, whether or not the general preliminary plat requirements have been attested to by the city engineer. City engineer Gordon has taken a look at the preliminary plat, and it has the required elements of our municipal code. Here is a picture of that. The gate that I had previously discussed is here and here, just so you have reference. We'll cover that in the PUD portion. The proposed phasing, so we do have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 that are requested by the applicant. And the next finding is that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-ways, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities and utilities are or are not adequate. Rather than list everything out here, I have referred to pages 4 through 7 of your staff report for the specific comments. Largely, the only true concern that any of our departments had was the fire department, and they just want to be sure that they get a second access at the 31st unit. Okay, utility improvements, it's a little difficult to see, but water and wastewater are shown running through the private streets there. Okay, the next finding is that the proposed preliminary plat does or does not comply with the subdivision design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standards. So between engineering and planning review, they have been vetted for compliance. We can go a little bit further with that request in the PUD portion of my staff report. Okay, finding B7D is that the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do or do not meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. So basically what I'm saying here is that there's been previous subdivisions and PUD approvals and modifications which have altered the standards of the zoning, of our zoning standards. Which extend to this request, and I'll recap those in the PUD portion of the report, and the proposed density of the area is 4.66 units per acre. All right, so now on to the PUD portion, another blank slide. So I've taken this out of the staff report. It just basically says that the PUD is not a way to just get rid of the standards that they're supposed to supply the public, or the public good, and meet the public good. Here's some bullet points of how they can do that and what your guys' responsibilities are. So previously approved modifications that would apply. So what I did is I took a look at what had happened in the past and how they're going to apply it to this request. And these are the ones that do apply. So they are asking for a reduction of a front yard setback from 20 to 15. This is very typical for Coeur d'Alene Place. It applies pretty much to the whole thing. They have a requested reduction for the side yard setbacks from 5 and 10 without an alley to 0 for all lots. They are still subject to the building department requirements for separation for fire. They are also continuing with a reduction of the driveway length from 20 feet to 18 feet from the back of sidewalk to the face of the garage. And then a flanking street, which is a street side yard, is actually an increase from the city's requirements of 10 feet to 15 feet. And if you want to ask the applicant why they have done that, you're welcome to. It's consistent with all the previous Coeur d'Alene Place approvals. So lot area and frontage is this goes again with all the rest of Coeur d'Alene Place, is a reduction from 5,500 square feet for a minimum lot to 4,000 square feet, and a reduction from the frontage requirement of 50 feet to 40 feet for single family homes. This allows for some flexibility as well as along the knuckles and things of that nature to have a reduced frontage standard. And then also to allow for rolled type curbing for the residential streets. And that is all previously approved. So what have they asked for new with this? They are asking for a rear yard reduction from 25 feet to 15 feet. So what I had put in here, the other numbers are the typical Coeur d'Alene Place PUD as a 20-foot rear yard setback instead of a 25, which is what we require. Park Rose, which one of our gentlemen up here lives in, they have a rear yard reduction that was actually more aggressive than what they're asking for here at 5 feet, which was approved. So they're asking for 15. So basically what it really boils down to is the miscellaneous I have listed up here. They have had private streets that are approved in the past that are gated, but this extends to a separate subdivision, so we make the request again for each subdivision. And then they have also asked to omit the mid-block walkway and maximum 600-foot block length along Atlas Road. Inside of the narrative there, I explain that a little bit more. Ultimately, what that means is with our new subdivision standards, which came into play about 2 years ago, we had a maximum block length. And what that does is it allows for pedestrian connections. The applicant has requested to not provide that because it's a gated community and wanted the privacy of the area to remain. You can ask him further if you have any additional questions. All right, so moving on to the findings for Boulevard 3rd Edition. First finding is the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Oh, that is actually in the previous one. Ramsey Woodland is the area that it's located. Here is the subject property. It's within a stable established area. It is vacant property, so it is intended to be improved. It's just in an area that we knew that had been improving owned by Coeur d'Alene Place. Here is the description of Ramsey Woodland today, as well as Ramsey Woodland tomorrow, and what their neighborhoods will be. Overall density is approximately 3 to 4 units per acre, although pockets of higher density and multifamily units are appropriate and compatible. Pedestrian bicycle trails, which they've provided along 3 sides. And parks within 5-minute walk away. Actually, they have open space shown right in the middle of the development. Neighborhood service nodes where appropriate, and multifamily and single-family housing units. So comprehensive plan goals and objectives, rather than listing each one out separately, I've highlighted the ones that, that apply. Finding B8B is design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. Here's some photos of the subject property. This is from Google Street View in 2012. It was the best wide-angle shot that I could find, showing all of the subject property there. It's very similar today. It has increased. Some of the landscaping has grown. These are pictures that I took just last week. So this is looking west towards Atlas from Hanley, and this is at the northeast corner of the property. Shows the buffer and the trail has already been improved. This is at the corner looking south. This is the area that will be improved along Atlas, that will have similar treatment. And then at the south end of the property, this is the southeast corner looking west from La Rochelle towards Atlas. All right, so moving on to the generalized land use plan, you can see here that this lighter kind of tan color is vacant property or unimproved property. The yellow is single-family dwellings. Blue is civic, which are largely parks in this case. The future, I've also shown the Fire Station 4 is located here, as well as the pump house for the well. And this is what the current zoning is. You can take a look here and see that the property was initially, and I've also referenced this in my staff report, it was initially going to be like a neighborhood service node at C17L and C17 PUD is what it was originally envisioned to be. I think the market has changed, and the applicant is looking to provide what the market will bear. You can ask him further questions if you have any. However, I have handled this through my staff report with the condition, our first condition, that this be residential only. And that's largely due to the private streets. You don't want commercial uses where people got to go through a gate to get to them. So it made a lot of sense to put that in there. Okay, finding B8C, the proposal is or is not compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. It's largely flat. It's less than 15% slope, and I've described the area up to this point. Here are some illustrative renditions of what we would expect the homes to look like in Boulevard 3rd. So finding B8D is the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing public facilities and services. Well, Coeur d'Alene Place has been under construction for 20 plus years and the utilities are there. Okay, so the proposal does, and then this is the next finding, the proposal does or does not provide adequate private common open space as determined by the commission, no less than 10% of the gross land area, free of buildings, streets, driveways, and parking areas. The common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreational purposes. So I've highlighted here in green what the open space areas are. I've taken, this was pretty small. You have to realize that this is a full-size sheet that needed to be blown up. So I've placed here what the phases are, and they have provided what the acreage is as well as the percentage of each in each phase. Ultimately, let me go back there. There will be 2.11 acres of open space through tracks A through D, which are the unbuildable tracks. And showing here what the trails will ultimately look like here. This one already exists. Like I had mentioned before, the gates would be at the north and south ends with the open space flanking the outside as well as in the center. Some landscaping features provided. This is what is expected to be built. It's illustrative at this point. They are still trying to decide whether or not they want to do some of these elements. There's the bottom half. And then finding B8F is whether or not the parking is sufficient for the users of the development. They've requested no reduction, which requires 2 per unit. The proposal does or does not provide for an acceptable method for perpetual maintenance of all common property. This is part of the Coeur d'Alene Place PUD, and the HOA will be a part of that. So there were 14 conditions. They are in your staff report as well as listed here. The other one that I have requested is that the buffer yards be installed or bonded for, depending on the time of year, along all the 3 frontages, so that as they construct, we have a green exterior that's functional as well as the trail that's functional while it's under construction. I've talked to the applicant and he's aware of that. Engineering is requiring that the multi-use path along Atlas be provided. So there are the conditions. Rather than go through each one of them, I'm sure you guys have read your staff reports and are aware. So the Planning Commission must consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And I'll stand for questions if there are any. The applicant is here.
Well, let's see if there's any questions for you at this hour, Sean. Yep, there's a question.
Just have one, Sean. If you could go back to that phasing chart that you had. We'll give you a second to get there. And I think I've asked this question in the past, but if I understand this correctly, and the spreadsheet that's embedded there, I think illustrates that each phase basically meets the 10% as you go, correct?
Yes. In this case, specific to Coeur d'Alene Place, they have a lot of other open space to draw from versus someone that just comes in for a specific standalone PUD. But they do meet that requirement here.
But, doesn't this 14 acres or whatever it is have to have its own 10%?
Correct.
Okay. So are we interpreting this that, as each phase goes, it's meeting the 10%? So market conditions, God help us, go south, and we end up with phase one, and the project stalls because the market's not there. It stands up.
Correct. It can stand on its own. Okay. Or if it's sold off, or a number of different things.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
So, would the applicant come up? You just state your name and address for the record.
I'll get Mr. Holm to help me get my PowerPoint up. My name is Kevin Sneidmiller. I reside at 6552 East Octavia Court in Post Falls. I'm here as the representing the applicant, Greenstone Kootenai 2, in the matter of, Mr. Holm said, a modification of the Coeur d'Alene Place PUD and the preliminary plat of Boulevard 3rd Edition.
Okay, now, Kevin?
Again,
I need you to raise your right hand. Just raise your right hand. I need to swear you in because it's quasi-judicial.
Okay.
So, do you swear the testimony you're going to give us tonight will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Now, you're all clear. Go ahead. Thanks. Just had to do that formality.
The project objectives that we have for this specific project in Coeur d'Alene Place in general is to develop a neighborhood that's harmonious with the existing neighborhoods around it, provide the infrastructure necessary to create a traditional neighborhood that includes tree-lined streets. We always try to create a walkable neighborhood with connectivity to the rest of Coeur d'Alene Place and the surrounding areas of the greater Coeur d'Alene, city of Coeur d'Alene. Ensure that the revisions that we're requesting remain consistent with the Coeur d'Alene Place master plan concept, which again has been in existence since the mid-1990s, and to date we've built about 1,400 homes and 250 apartment units, and feel that we have stayed very true to the original concept with a lot of open space, the trail system, and parks being a great part of Coeur d'Alene Place. Provide housing opportunities that meet the needs of the future homeowners in Coeur d'Alene Place. And this specific request is the third of what we identify as empty nester neighborhoods. We choose not to designate them as 55 plus from a legal perspective. We feel that people determine at what point they may choose to downsize and choose a different lifestyle. And so rather than designate our neighborhoods like this, we do it more through the type of product and size of lots and amenities that we place in these neighborhoods, and that kind of drives the demographic that choose these neighborhoods. Again, Mr. Holm pretty much covered everything. The existing zoning is C17 and C17L. We are proposing no zoning change due to the fact that our request is allowed in those two zones. The total site area is 14 plus acres with about 2.45 acres of open space. We calculate the total percentage of open space to be close to 17%. I noticed in the staff report they're saying a little over 13% of usable open space. One thing I would like to touch on here, and it was a question that Commissioner Ingold asked staff. Since the inception of Coeur d'Alene Place and the original agreement, we've agreed to provide a minimum of 10% of open space. Through the history of Coeur d'Alene Place, we've never been requested or required to adhere that each phase would necessarily meet the 10% requirement. And the reason that we proposed that originally was that as parks are located throughout and different types of open space. We strongly believe that it's more important that as an overall master plan community, we're meeting that requirement rather than specific phases. Happens to be in this proposed project, we are meeting that requirement, but historically you would find phases and projects within Coeur d'Alene Place that we brought that might have been slightly under. But overall, it's still our objective to meet or exceed that, and we are on track overall in the project to do that. Again, the proposed use is single-family detached homes, approximately 67 lots. What we always find is at final plat, when we bring forward each phase, likely the lots will get somewhat larger and the lot count will actually go down. We based this all on 50-foot lot frontages, which is actually a little bit greater than we're permitted for it at a 40-foot lot frontage. Again, density of 4.66 units per acre, and again, I believe at the end we'll be slightly under that. This is the overall project that's being proposed. One of the reasons that we're bringing this forward is what we're finding in Coeur d'Alene Place. There is not a great demand for commercial uses, and we have a location out on Ramsey and Hanley that we think is far better situated for that type of development, and that's where we're going to focus our commercial efforts. So we have determined that this is a good use for this site. Again, as you can see, south of La Rochelle is existing residential. East of this site in what was Boulevard 2nd is existing residential. Kind of to the northeast is also residential. Directly north is C17L, and then this doesn't show it, but directly north of that is public use for the current city fire station that's being built there. Again, we're proposing it to be built out in 3 phases. Very likely it will happen in 2 phases. We fully understand the IFC code that requires no more than 30 lots can be developed without a secondary access being perfected. So we will likely do it in 2 phases, the first phase staying at the 30-lot threshold, and then build out the balance of the neighborhood. Certainly it's always market-driven, but this is a fairly small project, and most of our phases are in the 30 to 40-lot range anyway. Again, this is a condensed version of the 2 slides that staff put up. This is the landscape plan. Again, it stays very true to what Coeur d'Alene Place has all been about. Tree-lined streets with a lot of linear open space. Again, there's a trail system from La Rochelle to Hanley, which will help perfect the trail system all the way from the southern boundary of Coeur d'Alene Place to the northern boundary. The only section that will now be left out is that small portion fronting the C-17 north of Hanley Road along Atlas. When the city is finished with their site, it will be done, and there's a small portion just north of that, which will be bringing a project forward in the spring of 2017. So in the very near future, the trail system will be fully perfected all the way from the southern boundary of Coeur d'Alene Place to the northern boundary along Hanley Avenue. We do concur with staff's request that the entire frontage of open space along this project be completed with the request for the first final plat. That's something we feel very strongly is important, so we have no problem with that condition. We are requesting 2 variances to the standard city code. I'll start with number 2. We're requesting a change to a rear yard setback to 15 feet. Again, we're already in Coeur d'Alene Place generally approved for a 20-foot setback down from the standard code of 25 feet. In Park Rose, we went to a request of 5 feet. We found that just to be a little bit tight, and so here we're requesting 15 feet. The reason for the request from 20, again, this demographic is generally not interested in larger yards. They are all, it's a maintenance-free community, so it's all maintained as part of their HOA fees, but we believe the 15 feet fits a little bit better, so that's a request. We're also requesting that we not be required to do the mid-block walkway connection, and the reason for that is two. One is that we find this demographic is security is very important to them, and so more access points that you provide, they believe that leads to the opportunity for more intrusion into their neighborhood, even though the gates are all locked. We also believe that it's not necessary in this situation because we have an access point with our main gates south on La Rochelle and north on Hanley. The access point with the pedestrian gate at Hanley leads directly to a trail that fronts Hanley Avenue that leads then to the Atlas Road Trail. The same thing holds true on the south at La Rochelle. The only difference being it's a sidewalk along La Rochelle and not a 10-foot street or a pathway, excuse me. So we believe that in this case, the mid-block walkway is probably not necessary. Generally, we believe it's a good addition to the city code. We've just completed one in the northern part of Coeur d'Alene Place along Atlas Road where we did a connection out, kind of a mid-block. It wasn't quite directly in the center. But so generally, we agree with the code, but in this situation, we're asking for a variance to it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. These are the site standards that are in place in that are approved in Coeur d'Alene Place. They've evolved over the last 20 years, and staff touched on most of them. One thing I do want to point out, when I was in front of this body back in 2011, we brought forward some changes to this. We feel very confident now that we've really refined them. We had several different zoning classifications that kind of had different approvals, and we've really kind of condensed those, and now they're very consistent throughout Coeur d'Alene Place. And I think that's good not only for us, but also for the city. One thing I do want to point out that staff did not mention in their report, that when a lot backs up to private, an alley or public or private open space, and in this case the alley doesn't apply, we are approved for a 0 rear yard setback. And so in some cases we do utilize that proposed site standard. So the rest of them are, again, staff touched on, so I'm not going to go into great detail. I'll close by saying we have reviewed and concurred with the staff analysis and recommended conditions. We always review those very closely. We feel like if we've done our job and done our homework and worked closely with staff leading up to this hearing, then we've worked out most of the issues, and so we feel very comfortable with the conditions staff is proposing. We believe it's consistent with the city's comprehensive plan goals and policies, meets or exceeds the adopted development standards. Again, it's harmonious with the established surrounding land uses, makes adequate provisions for public utilities and infrastructure services, and will not adversely affect the environment within the city and surrounding neighborhood. And again, we concur with the conditions placed on the preliminary plat. We request the approval of the Coeur d'Alene minor PUD modification and Boulevard third preliminary plat tonight, and we appreciate your time. I know it's getting kind of late, and you've had a long evening, so I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Schneidmiller. Thanks for being so patient, for waiting through all of the administrative stuff we waited through and whatnot. I wonder if we could pull up the preliminary plat. The graphic would help me ask you a question. Maybe. That'll work right there. So, from my own experience, I'm comfortable with the setbacks, and the deviations, and what I see in the Park Rose and Live. It's all good. This commission, we've had recent experience. I think it was called Garden Grove PUD development off of Prairie, and then there was another one. And what happened there, and we haven't had testimony tonight, but I don't see a lot of folks in the audience. But so when we approve, a shorter setback, like for the backyard, and you're really just looking at this development as itself. The expectation when you move in there, you know what you're getting, you know how close you're going to be to folks and whatnot. But for the folks that live on the street that runs north, south, just to the east of the development, those folks that would share backyards with these new homes, the new players coming in, are they going to be encroached there? It looks almost to my eye like those perimeter lots are deeper. Are they?
They are slightly. So the perimeter lots are all around 120 feet. So the interior ones are slightly less than that. Some of them are in the 116-foot range. And generally, I can't specifically tell you just because I don't recall Boulevard 2nd. They may be about 130 feet deep. In Coeur d'Alene Place in general, we have done in the last 10 years a lot of 120-foot deep lots. That's kind of a standard depth for it. So to answer your question, the lots backing up to the existing lot, in some cases they will have greater than a 15-foot setback. What it depends on is the house plan that goes on that lot. So we do, in the examples that staff put up, we do have a couple of house plans that we would project to be using in here that will probably get us down to the 15-foot setback. We will have some that will keep a 20-plus foot backyard rear yard setback. So again, it depends a little bit on the house plan that's going on each individual lot. That's part of the reason that we proposed the 15 instead of the 5 that we used in Park Rose. In Park Rose, we had some cases. Again, we had on two sides, we had lots that backed up to more traditional neighborhoods, and as we developed that out, we had some internal concerns about that, and that's the reason we're proposing 15 instead of 5.
The other question I had, thank you, is did I understand you correctly with respect to phasing? I see as a big benefit, to the public here, that trail along Atlas, because that's a missing link that's not there right now. Did you say that the trail, the whole distance from La Rochelle to Hanley, would be put in at the time or before the Phase 1 final plat records?
Well, Well, it will be put in with, that's correct. I mean, it will be, by the time we request the first phase final plat to be recorded. So with the construction of the first phase, the streets, the gate along La Rochelle, Tract A would be, and the trail would all, so all the landscaping and the trail would be completed.
So all that perimeter stuff really comes into play in phase one?
It does. Yeah, there will be some. So let me just expound on that a little bit. So again, because Hanley Avenue is an arterial, we're required to have 30 feet of landscape buffer. There's also 30 feet of right-of-way there. So from back of curb to the property line, there will be 60 feet of landscaping. And that's consistent all along Hanley with Coeur d'Alene Place. Realizing that, you know, at some point in the future, if Atlas gets widened and within the right-of-way, some of that goes away. But yes, certainly what is identified as Tract A, at least up to the corner of Atlas and Hanley, will be all done with the first phase. Already along Hanley, there is about 30 feet of landscaping that's already completely perfected all the way to Atlas Road. So we're talking about a portion of Tract A that you know, may get done with the subsequent phase. But all of it along Atlas will be completed.
And a comment, sorry, if you could get your reaction, if we were to deny the 600-foot run on Atlas and require a pass-through, you would probably have to lay this thing out such that the other required second entrance would go off to Atlas. You know, what I like, I guess, seeing here is that these folks have one way to get to a street light if they want out to Hanley, or, you know, at less busy times they might go down to La Rochelle. They got kind of a choice there. Traffic-wise, this seems like it would work well.
So to answer your question, Commissioner, no. If we were to be denied our request to be able to admit the mid-block, we would lose some lot count there. We feel strongly that the orientation to Hanley and La Rochelle is a better ingress-egress than out to Atlas. In Park Rose, we didn't have much option there. So we have one there off of Sorbonne. The way that neighborhood laid out, our second one had to go off of Atlas. If we'd had a better option, we wouldn't have done that. We would prefer not to have these type of private entrances go onto a major arterial. Even though Hanley is identified from the city standpoint as an arterial, we view it differently. So,
Kevin, maybe I could ask a question that might help clarify Commissioner Engel's question. That is a mid-block pedestrian walkway.
That's correct.
Point, not a drive.
Correct.
For a car, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was just thinking that if we required it, it could drive a redesign to, you know, put both there, since
right.
you have the one.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, that's the way I look at it. We would not request to move the entrance to Atlas. We would simply figure out, you know, we'd simply perfect one. Again, we believe because of the good pedestrian circulation we already have on Hanley and La Rochelle, and that coupled with the less opportunities for intrusion into this type of neighborhood, the better off our homeowners see it. So that's the reason we're making the request.
Okay, any other questions? All right.
Okay,
Thank you very much. So you have Jennifer Vest in favor, do not wish to testify. Jennifer out there? Guess not. Is there anyone else that wants to testify on this hearing? Okay. So you have some time for rebuttal, Kevin, but you don't have to use it. All right, is anyone working on a motion?
I would Make a motion, start with the PUD, that this matter having come before
Close the public hearing. You want to close the public hearing before the motion?
Oh, okay. All right, so public testimony is closed. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd be glad to. So with respect to the PUD, this matter having come before the Planning Commission tonight, and we review PUD 2-94.M.6, a request for a minor modification to the planned unit development known as Coeur d'Alene Place, applicant Kootenai Greenstone 2, for the 14.381 acres as known as Boulevard Second Edition. Proposed in the motion that we adopt findings B1 through B8 as are in page 1. Adopt B8A, that the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan, and that would be based on the fact that this is very much in sync with those described characteristics of the Ramsey Woodland neighborhood on page 11, and that all of those objectives that are described there pertain and are supported by this proposal. B8B, that the design and planning is compatible with the location on adjacent properties, and that is based on what we see provided by the applicant, preserving open space, the landscaping described, the adequacy of traffic flows, the trails that are provided, layout of buildings and such, and the on-site parking meeting the requirements. B8C, that the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties, and that, again, is based on the exhibits that are provided here and the fact that the topography and buildability of the acreage there, it's non-sloping. It's very relatively flat and very buildable, is very supportable. B8D, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by streets, public utilities, and services, and that is based on pages 4 through 7, documentation in the staff report from staff that there are no significant issues from will serve, adequacy of water, wastewater, other utilities, police, fire are okay. B8D, the proposal does provide adequate open common space of the minimum of 10%. The graphics and the analysis support the finding that that is provided. B8F, that the parking meets the 2 spaces per dwelling unit requirement, and no deviation is requested there. B8G, that the proposal does provide for acceptable method for perpetual maintenance. This would be part of the overall Coeur d'Alene Place HOA that is up and functioning, we believe, very well. And so in conclusion of the PUD portion, that we would conclude that the Planning Commission, pursuant to all of that, finds that the Kootenai Greenstone's request for approval of the planned unit development as described should be approved with 14 conditions as described and acknowledged by the applicant, plus a 15th condition that there be no drive-through windows. Just joking on the 15th one, a little late-night humor. That's the motion.
Okay. Thank you for that motion.
Second.
Now let's see if there's a, okay, good, there's a second to that motion. Any discussion? Okay, Shauna?
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Messina?
Yes.
Lutrip?
Yes.
Rumpler?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, so that's approved unanimously. Are you doing the other one?
So it might be good to have a subdivision to go along with that. This one's a little bit quicker, if you bear with me. I would similarly motion that the item S316M, which is the, I'm going to say, the same applicant, the same parcel, the S316M before us, that we motion that be approved based on the findings B1 through B7 in the findings worksheet, and that B7A be included with that in the finding that the plat has been determined by the city engineer as per page 2 of the staff report, and Sean Holm testimony that presentation that the city engineer says that it meets all the plat requirements. B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, right-of-ways, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities and utilities, all those good things are adequate, and that is based, again, on the comments and statements in the staff report, page 4 through 7. The staff have acknowledged that the adequacy of those features. B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does comply with all of the design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standards based on what we find on page 8, that staff has vetted all of those requirements against 16.40 of the subdivision code and vetted those things for compliance, and they meet it. B7D, that the lots proposed do meet the requirements of the applicable district, and that's based on the fact that the density of 4.66 units per gross acre is acceptable. With the deviations that are described, the lot lines, the lots from 5,500 to 4,000, the frontages from 50 to 40 feet, and the rolled curbing, and other deviation in the 600-foot block have been determined such that they are acceptable. And with that, the Planning Commission would move to approve the preliminary plat as described in the application. Should be, I would motion to be approved with the 14 conditions that we mentioned that are in the findings worksheet.
Thank you very much for those motions.
Second.
Second by Messina. Any discussion on this one? Okay, Shanna?
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Messina?
Yes.
Lutrip?
Yes.
Rumpler?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, so those are both approved unanimously, PUD 2-94 and S-3-12.M.
I move we adjourn.
Let's see if there's
Second.
a second to that. No, we have a second by Rumpler.
Rumpler said yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so
My
we're
knees
adjourned
have
till
had it.
midsummer.
Right
Midsummer?
Hopefully,
Park Rose. I got